I would like to thank Established Titles for sponsoring today's video. Established Titles are a project based on historic Scottish custom, where landowners are referred to as lords and ladies. What Established Titles does is it allows you to buy your own small plot of land in Scotland from about 1 square foot. After this, you'll officially be a lord or lady. Established Titles plant a tree with every order and work with global charities, One Tree Planted and Trees for the Future, to support global reforestation efforts. They have all sorts of packages. There is even a couples pack, and you can even allow your whole family to join with the Family Titles pack. Just to clarify, this is an official title of ladyship or lordship, where you can officially change your name to lord or lady and put it on things such as your credit cards or airplane tickets. Established Titles have told me that the first 200 people purchasing a title pack using my link will effectively be next to my own briefcase plot, or just a short walking distance. Depending on how many of you want to become a lord or lady, we could build our own kingdom. It makes a great surprise gift that everyone will be talking about. Established Titles is actually running a massive sale right now. Plus, if you use the code briefcase, you get an additional 10% off. Go to establishedtitles.com/briefcase to get your gift now and help support the channel. Today we are looking at a case from the early 19th century, so sit back as we go to France. Edme Samuel Castaing was born in 1796 in Alençon, in Normandy in France. It was a town that had been long renowned for its lace-making traditions, which started in the 1600s. Edme was the youngest of his parents' 4 children. The family were not rich, but Edme's father worked hard as an Inspector General in the Department of Woods and Forests, a respectable career that Edme's eldest brother also entered. His other brother joined the military as an engineer. Young Edme was a very studious child. He loved to read and attended the local school, where he proved to be an outstanding student, winning many prizes. When he was 19 years old, he decided that he wanted to be a doctor and was given the opportunity to attend the Paris School of Medicine. Paris in the early 19th century was very different to the small town where he had been brought up. It was a turbulent time for the country. In February 1815, Napoleon had escaped from his exile on Elba, and on the 20th of March had entered Paris, which resulted in him ruling again for 100 days. However, following France's defeat at the hands of the 7th Coalition in the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon was persuaded to abdicate, which he did on the 22nd of June. King Louis XVIII, who had fled the country when Napoleon arrived in Paris, then returned and took the throne again on the 8th of July. But Edme tried not to concern himself with the political events that were dominating the conversations in the streets and cafes of Paris. Instead, he studied as much as he could and graduated in 1821. During his time at the School of Medicine, he had become acquainted with a lady who was the widow of a judge and already had 3 children, but was now finding it a struggle to look after them. As Edme was now a qualified doctor, he was determined to make enough money to be able to provide for his new mistress and her family. However, things became difficult for the young doctor when a friend of his, who had previously borrowed 600 francs, defaulted on the debt, a debt for which Edme had given his name as security, and it was now due to him to repay the money. This would not be easy, as at the time there was not an abundance of work for doctors, and even less for the doctors with less practical experience. It also meant that any work he was able to find did not pay particularly well. He asked his father for assistance, but he refused to help, and although his mother attempted to persuade court officials to allow her son more time to pay the debts, her efforts were in vain. He was given a certain amount of time to repay the loan, but if it was not repaid, Dr. Edme Castang would be sent to debtor's prison. He was good friends with 2 brothers, named August and Hippolyte Ballet. They are of similar age to Edme, but August, who was the elder of the 2, had not been very well cared for by his mother. Instead, she much preferred his younger brother Hippolyte. Madame Ballet had left August to be raised by the servants. He was made to eat with them in the kitchen, and when he was old enough, he was sent away to school. Her second son, however, was the apple of his mother's eye, and along with his elder sister, enjoyed all the privileges associated with life in a well-off family in early 19th century Paris. Hippolyte grew into an industrious and hard-working young gentleman. He had many friends, and people would often comment on his refined manner and charming demeanour. August, however, was very different to his brother. He did not work very hard, and was known to be quite self-indulgent. Despite his mother treating him so unfairly during his childhood, when she died, she made sure that her money was divided equally between her children, who all inherited around 260,000 francs. Now a young gentleman of significant wealth, August started to spend money freely. He was often seen out in Paris entertaining young ladies. He was very different to his brother, who was very careful with the money he had inherited, and disapproved of August's recklessness. But as he showed no signs of changing, Hippolyte decided to rewrite his will and make his sister the sole beneficiary. He had never been very convinced by Dr. Edme Castang, but the fact that he was a doctor was somewhat reassuring, and when his own doctor advised that he spend the summer of 1822 taking the waters of Enghien, a spa resort about 10 miles outside Paris, Edme would go and visit him. Hippolyte returned to Paris on the 22nd of September, and everyone commented what good health he had. The following week he went to see his sister and her husband, Monsieur Martignon. They both told him that the summer away in Paris seemed to have been worthwhile, as he looked very well indeed. However, the following day, Hippolyte Ballet became quite ill and took to his bed. He was vomiting, his face was swollen, and his complexion was very pale. His sister and brother-in-law came to see him, but when they arrived, they were told that they would be unable to enter his room, as he was resting and being attended by his good friend, Dr. Castang. 3 days later, on October the 5th, Hippolyte Ballet died. A post-mortem was conducted by Dr. Segala, along with Dr. Castang. They concluded that death was due to pleurisy, aggravated by a consumptive condition that the deceased had developed in childhood, and it was believed that he had inherited from his mother. Hippolyte had barely spent any of the money that he had inherited from his parents, and left around 240,000 francs. Edme advised August that his sister, Madame Martignon, was a main beneficiary of his brother's will, something that very much surprised August. However, Edme then said that the will was held with a notary named Monsieur Lebret, who would be willing to destroy it for a payment of 100,000 francs. He added that the notary was not prepared to deal directly with August and would only go through himself as an intermediary. August agreed, and any will that may have been made by Hippolyte Ballet was never found. His estate was therefore divided according to French law at the time, with 3/4 going to his brother August and the remaining quarter to his sister, Madame Martignon. A few days after his brother's death, August Ballet cashed 100,000 francs of stocks, which he gave to Dr. Edme Castang. Monsieur Lebret, however, never knew of such a will and was unaware of the arrangement made between August Ballet and Dr. Edme Castang, and he never received the 100,000 francs. Dr. Castang now became very generous indeed. He paid off his debts, invested 66,000 francs in securities, lent his mother 30,000 francs, and gave 4,000 francs to his mistress. But while Edme Castang was enjoying his newfound wealth, August had become a little concerned. He suddenly realised that at any time the doctor could inform the authorities of how he had paid Monsieur Lebret 100,000 francs to destroy his brother's will. He also believed that his friend Dr. Castang had just acted out of kindness and had not benefited in any way from his great deception, possibly because he feared his actions may one day be made public, or perhaps he was very thankful to Edme for the part he played in securing the majority of his brother's estate. But for whatever reason, August Ballet changed his will and made Dr. Edme Samuel Castaing the sole beneficiary. He then started to distance himself from the doctor, and this caused great concern for Edme. He was aware that August was not a gentleman who saved his money. In fact, he was known to be quite reckless with it and spent quite freely. And what would happen if he got married and his wife gave him a child? Although he had been made the sole beneficiary of an extremely wealthy gentleman's fortune, he was unable to rely on him not spending everything he had, or writing another will in favour of someone else, and in this case, he would not benefit at all in the unfortunate event of the death of August Ballet. At the end of May 1823, Dr. Castaing wrote to his cousin, named Monsieur Mallet, who worked as a clerk in a notary's office. He wanted to know if a will would be valid, if it had been written by a gentleman who was not well, and who had left all his estate to the physician who was looking after him. Monsieur Mallet replied to the letter, informing his cousin that any such will would indeed be valid. Edme then sent his cousin the will of August Ballet. The will had been made a few months earlier and was dated the 1st of December 1822, and Dr. Castaing was the sole beneficiary. It was now May 1823, and the weather around Paris was very pleasant. Edme accompanied his friend, August Ballet, on a visit to Saint-Cloud, which is in the countryside, about 6 miles to the west of Paris. According to his servants, August was in very good health. On the second evening away, Edme asked that a drink be made for them both, using a lemon mix that he had with him. The drink was so sour, August complained to his friend, but nevertheless, he finished it. That evening, August Ballet started to feel rather unwell. The next day, the 31st of May, Edme left the hotel early and took a carriage back to Paris. Here he visited a chemist and purchased tartar emetic. This was usually used to induce vomiting and in the treatment of helminthic and fungal infestations. He then went to another chemist and purchased grains of acetate of morphia. He then returned to St. Cloud, telling staff that he had been out for a long walk and enjoying the weather and the fresh country air. Dr. Castaing ordered that some warm wine be sent up to their rooms. When the 2 glasses arrived, he added some lemon and sugar that he had brought with him from Paris. The drink was not to August's tastes, and he complained that it was sour. Nevertheless, he finished it. Later, however, he told Edme that he did not feel at all well. Dr. Castaing told him to rest, and then left. August took to his bed. He was suffering with terrible stomach pains, and was sick. The maid preserved his vomits, as she thought that the doctor may want to examine it. But when Dr. Castaing returned, he instructed the maid to dispose of it. He also said that he thought another doctor should be summoned to give a second opinion, and suggested one be sent for from Paris. August, however, thought it would be better to call on the services of someone more local. A young man who worked at the hotel then went to find the St. Cloud doctor, a gentleman named Dr. Pigache. When he arrived, he was met by Dr. Castaing, who informed him that in his opinion, Monsieur August Ballet was suffering from cholera. Dr. Pigache asked if any of the patient's vomit had been kept, but was told that the maid had disposed of it. He then prescribed a tonic and instructed the patient to rest. Edme stayed with his friend August, but his condition did not improve. Instead, he suffered convulsions and complained that he was feeling weak. Dr. Pigache returned. He was surprised to find that his patient's health had not improved, but Dr. Castaing told him that he had started to say that he was feeling worse shortly after taking the tonic. By late evening, August was in a terrible state. He was having convulsions and eventually fell into a state of unconsciousness. The renowned Paris physician, Dr. Peloton, was sent for, but when he eventually arrived at the hotel in St. Cloud, Monsieur August Ballet was dead. The following day, a post-mortem was performed by Dr. Peloton. During this time, Dr. Edme Castang was asked not to leave the hotel. The post-mortem revealed that there was no trace of any poison in the body of the deceased. The death was declared to be due to inflammation of the stomach and cerebral inflammation, which could have been attributed to natural causes. However, despite the findings of the renowned Paris doctor, Edme was not immediately released from suspicion. Instead, he was taken to Paris, while an investigation into the death of his friend was conducted. As the investigation continued, he was transferred to a prison in Versailles. The authorities looked in more detail at the life of Dr. Edme Castang. They discovered that he had purchased acetate of morphia just hours before August Ballet's death. His 100,000 franc payment followed the death of Hippolyte Ballet, and that he was the sole beneficiary of August Ballet's estate. After they had concluded an investigation that lasted for 5 months, Dr. Edme Castang was charged with murder. The trial took place in Paris on the 10th of November 1823. He was tried on 3 counts: the murder of Hippolyte Ballet, the destruction of Hippolyte Ballet's will, and the murder of August Ballet. All charges were to be tried simultaneously. The indictment against him consisted of 100 closely printed pages. He was defended by 2 advocates, one named Roussel, who was an old school friend of his, and a very well-respected attorney named Pierre-Antoine Berrière. In court, Edme was quite meticulous and took notes about everything that was said. He was described as looking more like a priest than a doctor. His soft voice and unassuming demeanour lent him an air of patience and humility. When questioned about the destruction of Hippolyte Ballet's will, he replied that he had indeed seen a draft of the will, which was made out in favour of Hippolyte's sister, but he said that he had not told August that the notary Monsieur Lebray was in possession of a copy, and that he would destroy it in exchange for 100,000 francs. An investigation into the finances of the notary, Monsieur Lebray, concluded that the money in question had never reached him, and he was regarded as an honest gentleman. The authorities did not believe that any copy of a will made by Hippolyte Ballet had ever been in his possession, so how could Edme Castang suddenly have got 100,000 francs? The doctor tried to explain this, but his attempt was not very plausible. Neither was his statement about why he had travelled to Paris on the 31st of May to purchase morphia and antimony, and had strangely gone to 2 separate pharmacies when he could have purchased both in the same one. And when asked what he had done with the remainder of these substances, he confessed that he disposed of them shortly after August had died, just in case anyone suspected him of deliberately trying to poison his friend. He also felt uneasy when he tried to explain why he had instructed the maids to throw away August Ballet's vomit. However, no trace of either poison was found in the deceased man's body, and despite the circumstances that may suggest that his demise was caused by Dr. Edme Castang, the conclusion from the autopsy had declared that the death had been due to natural causes. The court heard how the defendant had greatly benefited from the death of his friend, Hippolyte Ballet. The prosecution told how on the 18th of September 1822, just a few days before Hippolyte died, Dr. Castang had purchased 10 grains of acetate of morphia from the same chemist he had used on the 31st of May, when he had hurriedly travelled from St. Cloud to Paris, shortly before August Ballet died. It was also noted that while studying medicine, poisons had always been a favourite topic of a defendant, especially vegetable poisons, of which morphia is one. There were witnesses who spoke of a defendant's good character and said that he was a kind and thoughtful gentleman who showed great kindness and generosity to others. The trial lasted for 8 days, but when it ended, the jury took just 2 hours to consider their verdict. They found the defendant, Dr. Edme Castang, not guilty of the murder of Hippolyte Ballet, but guilty of destroying his will, and guilty of the murder of August Ballet. This decision was not unanimous, and was only by 7 votes to 5. Asked if he had anything to say before judgment was given, he replied, "No, but I shall know how to die. Though I am the victim of ill fortune, of fatal circumstance, I shall go to meet my 2 friends. I am accused of having treacherously murdered them. There is a providence above us. If there is such a thing as an immortal soul, I shall see Hippolyte and August Ballet again. There is no empty declamation. I don't ask for human pity. I look to God's mercy, and shall go joyfully to the scaffold. My conscience is clear." Dr. Edme Castang was then sentenced to death and ordered to pay 100,000 francs in damages to the family of August Ballet. Of course, the sentence was appealed, but this was rejected, and on the 6th of December 1823, Edme Samuel Castaing was executed. He was 26 years old. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual, please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next brief case.